Is Will the moderator?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would, but I have another.
be 2 to 3, 4 minutes, and then we'll move on. And if there's anyone that wants to add to that, please do. Now, how is Hawaii viewed in the cannabis communities nationally, globally, internationally? Will Grinnell.
It's obviously very well known, just as Hawaii is. I've had the pleasure of being able to travel a little bit this past couple of years to other cannabis communities, expos like this, everywhere from Argentina to Germany to Spain, Colombia, all over the place. And of course, traveling as a Hawaiian resident, I carry aloha with me and try to be an ambassador of aloha every chance given, and promote Hawaiian cannabis. And everybody perks up when they hear about it. It's just a no-brainer. We are the strongest brand in the world, as it is Hawaii. A lot of people are wearing aloha shirts all over the world and so forth. So it's been a very stimulating conversation with all these different communities around the world, and exciting. I've really enjoyed it quite a bit, and people are ready to see Hawaiian cannabis being exported around the world, and it would be the top choice, of course.
Would anyone like to add to Will's? And if not, we'll just move on.
I would.
Please do, Karlyn.
I think, so as a person that's a part of the regulated medical dispensary system we have now, I've had the pleasure of speaking to people from Canada, or speaking to people from the East Coast or the West Coast, and I think
A little louder, please.
the one thing that's clear, right, is that they all know that Hawaii is the safest tropical destination for a vacation. Hands down, this is the best place to come, whether you're single or whether you're a family, and they expect an exotic and unique experience of Hawaii in general. Like, that is the expectation for us. And I think a lot of people that are already in the cannabis community get here and they're very sad and disappointed. We have a 25-year-old medical cannabis program that has showed almost zero movement. And I think we should, after 25 years, and thanks to your hard work, being the first state to legalize medical cannabis through an act of legislation, we should be leading in cannabis education and research and farming, and we are not. We are not. We have one of the oldest medical cannabis programs in the nation. We have issued the least amount of licenses to date. We have one of the lowest participation rates, and the program is collapsing. And so I think that really speaks to failures by the Department of Health and by our capital to figure out how to create a thriving and healthy industry for all of us, and then embrace all the changes that are happening, right? 24 other states have already legalized adult use cannabis, and we have one of the most over-regulated medical programs today.
Mary Jane?
I just want to piggyback off of the conversation in regards to cultural misappropriation, which is happening very rampantly. I serve as the executive director of the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association, but prior to doing that, and my start kind of in the cannabis industry was Tribal Hemp and Cannabis magazine. So I started the nation's first and only print publication dedicated to all things tribal, hemp, and cannabis. And but I put my grandma on the cover because my grandma went to federal prison for growing weed in Idaho when I was a little girl. I know a big part of the work that we have to do is the advocacy side of things, so running free advertisements in print. I mean, Mary Bailey did not even know this, but the very first full-page print ad for Last Prisoner Project was ran in my cute little magazine. But the one thing that I found when I was doing this work is that people know ethos, the story, the value, the mission that's coming from different communities, and one of them is straight out of the islands. So I can name at least 5 brands that are from stateside that call themselves something that should be originating from intellectual property and trademark here from the islands, from the families and from the bloods here. So I can say that not leaning into it from the marketing and branding to carve out that niche, to have that global presence, is going to be kind of a setback, if you will, but the story behind the brands is why people fall in love with it and why they stay and stick with social justice and racial injustice and inequity, that's a huge concern that those brands aren't being built because, you know, Pono Cannabis, that's in Washington State. So.
Thank you, Mary Jane.
Well, I just want to make a quick comment.
Quick comment, please. Thank you.
I wanted to address this from the Japanese perspective because this was raised last year as a potential reason why we shouldn't have recreational legalization because that would turn away Japanese tourists. And I'm married to a Japanese woman, and there is a lot of stigma associated with cannabis in Japan, but they've cultivated hemp for decades. It's used to make clothing for the emperor's family. And I think there's a large interest in the medical use of cannabis, not so much recreational. So here again, I would point to medical use as something that could also attract the Japanese tourists.
Correct. And just, well, let me move on if I may, because we have a few. But a quick feedback. The comments Dr. Otto was mentioning are the comments that were made by our prosecutor, Steve Hall. And plain and simply, are the Japanese avoiding California and Disney? You figure it out. So.
Also, former Governor Lindo
Yes.
made a comment on it that was quite harsh.
Yes. So 2026, I believe, is a gubernatorial election year. So if you have an opportunity to go to a town meeting or a political forum and the candidates are there, ask them their position on cannabis. Point blank. Don't be afraid. It's time to advocate and it's time to be loud. So next question is for Karlyn. What is special about Hawaiian-grown cannabis?
I like this question. So I believe that Hawaii cannabis is defined by her people and her places. And so Hawaii is one of the most unique, culturally diverse populations in the world, right? And that's thanks to the immigration of forced labor in the 1800s. And so for over 100 years, we've had combined knowledge transfer, right? Between Chinese people, Filipino people, Japanese people, Portuguese people, all of Polynesia, you know, sharing everything from language to customs, to beliefs, to agriculture. And in exchange, the Native Hawaiian people shared those same things and then included their expertise of the land and the water. And so together, right, all of those different people from all over the continent have created this rich, beautiful, complex heritage, and cannabis is a part of that heritage. Specifically for us, plantation workers brought cannabis with them for medicinal purposes in the 1800s. And so they brought that to Hawaii, they shared it with the Native Hawaiians, and that's how cannabis became pakalolo and was introduced into la'au lapa'au, which is Hawaiian for plant medicine. And so I think that's a beautiful origin story, and it makes Hawaii even more special. And then of course there's a place, and Will is the expert grower here today, so he could talk about this for forever. But Hawaii is one of the youngest land masses on the planet. And we also have the largest climate range per square foot. Okay, so we have all of these microclimates. They're all stacked together and condensed in a really small footprint. We're also the most isolated island chain on Earth. And so these things create every possible climate from the ocean to like the top of Mauna Kea, right? It's all different biospheres. And these biospheres create things that you can find nowhere else in the world. They are globally singular. You can only find it here. And because we have such rich volcanic soil, you combine that with multi-generational farming practices from the ocean to the top of the mountain, and we see a very, very rare and place-driven agricultural outcome for everything, from our land-raised genetics to our heirloom genetics. It is not the same. What we grow and how we grow and what we produce here is very, very exclusive, and it is very, very premium. And you know, I would ask everyone to think about things like San Francisco sourdough, or Napa Valley wine, or Kona coffee, right? Those are all premium things, and we have the opportunity here to take what we have been doing for over 100 of years in a very, very isolated area and share it with the world.
Thank you.
Well put.
Would everyone like to briefly add to that? I think we all agree that Hawaiian grown is special, no doubt, no doubt. Okay. How do we responsibly promote Hawaii as a cannabis destination? Representative.
Thank you. I kind of hinted at it already. The bill that we're looking at, which combines the plant and treats it and regulates it, and I hope regulates it more wisely than the overregulation that we're seeing now, is the way forward. I will share with you, when I went to New York City with my daughters a summer ago, to be approached on the street by vendors who were just like standing in line to go to a Broadway show, and then coming up to us, you want this, and I was shocked actually. And so I think when people from Hawaii who are more moderate or not open to it, when they see that in other states happening, they get scared. They don't want that kind of deregulation here. So I think we have to legalize it. And what I don't appreciate is when I go into Waikiki now, and I can see it being sold now under various CBD products, and I'm just like, this is crazy, right? So I really want to see a unified regulated system that's not overregulated, but that does it wisely and smartly, and then we can do the marketing and we can promote it, because I mean, what I just learned, I didn't realize. Thank you, Karlyn, for educating me. I didn't realize that it was an immigrant product. I just didn't. And so we have this opportunity, and we're missing it, right? We're missing the boat right now.
Power to the immigrants. Mary Jane, what are your thoughts on social equity in cannabis, nationally, internationally, and how should Hawaii fit in terms of low-income people, disenfranchised individuals with criminal records? How can social equity be a part of Hawaii's future role in cannabis?
I've been a part of the cannabis landscape, kind of west moving east coast as far as policy concerns, and have seen what happens when you don't have a social equity component in your legislative reform. And it is the picture that we don't want to see of what's happening in cannabis. It is only supporting the corporate cannabis monopoly build out in different states. And so I see it as being really integral here because it is, legislating cannabis almost in a vacuum. In our reservation communities, we don't have the opportunity to necessarily do this for our families. And I can tell you that American Indian, Alaska Native communities, we have seen an uptick in federal American Indian, Alaska Native incarceration since legalization for possession. And so it goes back to those things that Mary was talking about earlier with like the conspiracy and the other charges. And so it is super critical as we have this conversation about adult use here, that those programs are put out on the front end, not on the back end. So many lessons that Hawaii can learn about how to do social equity by taking spokes off of some of these other states' wheels. And sadly, some of those states don't even have a wheel of social equity to even grab a spoke from. So like Washington State, that has kind of become like a retroactive thing where they're trying to put grants out there for social equity. But the money, the licenses are saturated. There's just not really an opportunity. So as much investment on the front end of a social equity reform program to have the grants so that people have the money to make it by before they get operational. There's just so many things that are beneficial about the social equity, also in regards to the elimination of the records. That's been a big one. My grandma, again, I keep referencing here, my grandma, she's 88 years old this year. She's turning 88 in May. When she went to college, she was 72 years old. She had to fill out her FAFSA and declare that she was a felon for growing cannabis. And then when she graduated from college in her 70s, she got denied an Indian Gaming Commission background license. She couldn't get her gaming license because she had to declare that she was a felon. This happened when she was still a grandma when it happened, but I say this to say, because I was in elementary school. I was in 2nd grade, and I remember going to those assemblies in school, where they had McGruff the crime dog come into the elementary school, and at a little red school, just like here on the islands, families know each other. People know. We know who the plugs are. Everybody knew that my dad was still growing. And so I think that the plant allows us to have a healthier conversation about how we want this to look for our unborn great-grandchildren. That's what, to me, social equity is. It's not just repairing the harms from the past war. It's making sure we get this shit right for our unborn great-grandkids.
Thank you. Would anyone like to react to that, Dr. Otto?
Yes, I just want to make a few comments on that. I was surprised when we were on the 2014 dispensary task force that there was not a Native Hawaiian representative. When our licenses were issued, there was not one that was set aside for Native Hawaiian applicants. But at the same time, I have trouble with taking minority groups that have been disenfranchised and encouraging them to, put their whole life savings on the line and engage in activities where they could lose it all because of federal problems. And when that happens, they're completely on their own. So I think there needs to be a way to ensure that these minority groups are not going to be put, or that any of our licensees are going to be put at those risks.
Okay, and this next question will be for you, Dr. Otto. With that said, what type of laws or legislation will help Hawaii in the cannabis or medical cannabis
He's got a
industry?
list.
Yeah, this
Dr.
is kind
Otto
of
can
my
speak
sweet spot.
forever on this, but again, we have limited
I
time.
will,
but
I will keep it
please
short, I promise.
give them your best. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to start this answer with reading very briefly from our 1999 Medical Use of Cannabis Act, introduced in 1999, didn't get approved the first session, carried over in the biennium to 2000, and was finally approved because they agreed that the program should go with the Department of Public Safety and not the Department of Health, which I think was a mistake, we can see. So anyway, in the introduction of these bills, of course, there's a little bit of background. And it says, the legislature further finds that allowing the medical use of marijuana could promote Hawaii as being an international center for medical treatment and research. That is the intent of their original intent. And I think actually that's where the potential is in medical use, because that is an authority that rests with the state. I believe it's a constitutional authority that's been reserved to the states. It's also a sovereign authority that I believe the state needs to protect. And I really have to give big kudos to our legislature in 2021 because they addressed this issue with a resolution, HCR 132. I just want to read you the introduction. It's very, very brief. Requesting the Department of Health to apply to the Drug Enforcement Administration's Office of Diversion Control for an exception under Title I Code of Federal Regulations, Section 1307.03, and request formal written acknowledgement that the listing of marijuana extract, and tetrahydrocannabinols as controlled substances in Federal Schedule I does not apply to the protected activities in Hawaii revised statutes. Now, this was a very bold move for our legislature. I don't think they're really given credit for this. Some people say, oh, it was a resolution, doesn't really mean anything. Well, the legislature basically, I believe, fulfilled their duty under the oath of office, which obliges them to protect the Constitution. And at the time, they didn't want to, I believe, insult the Department of Health. They wanted to defer to the department's opinion and their decision on this. And so they felt the resolution was the better way to go, and I respect that. And it's been sitting with the Department of Health for the past almost 5 years and has not been acted upon, and we do not know why, and we are not allowed to discuss that with the Governor's office or the Attorney General. So we need public discussion on that, I think, at a very minimum, and I've been asking for an informational briefing and things like that. So I'm very grateful today that at least we can have this discussion to some extent. And maybe there are other things that we can do to move this forward this session, perhaps another resolution that could take this a little bit further so that we could make it possible for our dispensaries to operate intrastate without violating federal regulations.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add to that? Sure.
I think this is really interesting because as we look at our congressional delegation and we are seeing the uncertainty at the federal level, just the chaos. Like, think about that. Think about the chaos that's going on at the federal level. And I haven't been following the cannabis scene nationally for a while because I'm in public safety at the moment. But I think the ability of states to navigate in a chaotic federal administration is a smart way to approach things at a certain level because, right, it's so chaotic. But if we can figure out ways and knowing that it has just been descheduled, or not descheduled, rescheduled, what has that mean now? It's only so recently, and Will, I think we were just starting to talk about it, but what does rescheduling mean? Does it now open the doors to more things that can be done with JABSA to start up clinical trials? Have we explored any of those things? This is a space that we should be pursuing even as we pursue the parallel tracks of legalization or a constitutional amendment, because we need to be multitasking. We can do it. I know we can do it. And this is a great place. I'll make a little plug. I am running for Congress, and you just gave me an idea. We need to get our congressionals to start talking about what our industry is doing here. Have you guys had conversations with it? How do you protect the medical marijuana industry here now? I've never had that conversation with my congressperson. We need to have those, and we have to figure out a way to operate in all these kinds of spaces. So thank you again, Dr. Otto, for pushing us in another direction.
Thank you.
Briefly. So, yeah, this rescheduling issue is huge. Right now, our dispensaries and our patients are violating federal law under Schedule 1. If it moves, and we're all operating under this attitude of non-enforcement, which I don't think is helping. I think it's actually encouraging criminal activity. So if it goes to Schedule 3, well then actually federal regulations could be applied. DEA, FDA registration to manufacture and distribute a Schedule 3 drug, which right now is only being issued for FDA-approved clinical trials to produce a Schedule 3 drug product that can be distributed across state lines and sold in pharmacies. So then what's going to happen to our dispensaries? Unless there are specific provisions for our state producers, it could make things actually worse than it is now.
Thank you. Let's hypothetically say Hawaii legalizes adult rec use. Karlyn, what does this mean for Hawaii's tourism industry?
Cannabis tourism would create a completely new industry that we don't have today. It would be new revenue streams that, will go from producing $0 today to who knows how much when that happens. And new money is better than no money. I think creating a thoughtful regulatory framework system that allows various new entrants into the regulated market could offer us so much more growth than I think what we can envision, right? Travel experiences could be curated around cannabis experiences that are very, very specific to Hawaii. You could include and think about having things like craft dispensaries, and we could do consumption lounges or restaurants with infused food, and that's not even the tip of the iceberg when you think about agritourism, right? And including farm tours or farm to table experiences for people when they get here. And then what about lodging, right? We have one of the biggest hotel industries. There is so much opportunity to do cannabis-friendly lodging and accommodations. And so I think we have to figure out how to get all of the representatives and the senators that are in the Capitol today, that are immovable, that are hard-nosed, to reconcile the facts, and we have to hold them accountable. We keep missing out every year. You can't keep kicking this can down the road. We have already been left behind, and we will continue to be left behind unless we figure out how to motivate the Capitol to do the hard work that it's going to take to figure out a regulatory framework that makes everyone successful, including all of us. And you're hearing it more often, right? Some states are covering child care with their cannabis revenue. Some states are covering and offering free school lunches moving forward. They are putting air conditioners in all of the classrooms. Look at the air conditioning drama just this past week. All of that money wasted because of mismanagement of funds. And we see that today in the medical cannabis program. There's not a mismanagement of funds, but there is a mismanagement of the program. And so we all really need to come together, right? Whether you're black market or gray market or white market, regulated, non-regulated, everyone needs to hui together and figure out how to collaborate. And in the perfect collaboration, nobody's gonna be happy, right? It's like a fair divorce. The husband is mad, the wife is mad, but everybody got something, and it's gonna be that way. Medical licensees will not be happy, doctors will not be happy, you know, black market growers will not be happy. The main thing is that the consumer is happy, and that we are setting up a regulatory framework that allows everybody to participate, with the primary objective being to take care of the end consumer, with the hopes of growing all of this unrealized state revenue for the people of Hawaii.
Thank you. We'll take questions at the end if there's time, because we have quite a few, and I'm sure they'll be around to also speak with some of you if you want to chat with them. Moving on, and this is a question I like to ask all of you. And again, if we do have adult recreational use, should homegrown cannabis be allowed in our neighborhoods? Under certain restrictions and guidelines, but you get the drift. Will, do you want to start?
Yeah, obviously homegrown should be the #1 emphasis. Otherwise, what do you do, right? You go and buy it for a lot of money. So yes, homegrown needs to be preserved. And this is also a conversation that goes back to the rescheduling that just happened. So Schedule 3 products like steroids and so forth, technically and very much written in the law for all Schedule 3 products, is that there is no home production of them. So that's one of the big threats that we face that can affect the dispensaries and everyone else. There's so many things. This rescheduling thing is good for medical study and universities and stuff like that, but unfortunately it's probably going to, well, you know, with the FDA controlling it and the pharmaceutical industry now having access as well, which they should, but also they should not be able to control it. And this, unfortunately, it is going to be monopolized. It's the way it's written right now. But as far as when it is legalized, homegrown should be the first emphasis, and really regulation should only be at the gateway where it goes into the legal market. If someone wants to grow an entire yard of marijuana, let them. What are they going to do with it? I mean, people are sending pounds out from the mainland for cheap. There is no market for the flowers anymore here in Hawaii. It's about making medicine.
Thank you. Anyone else like to answer regarding homegrown?
We have to allow people to produce their own plants, their own food, their own drink, free from anyone else telling them how to do it, especially if it is for self-consumption. People, and we're talking about Hawaii, right? We just talked about, we are hundreds of years into agriculture here. Like, you can't take away people's right to grow in this state. You can control it and sure, maybe set limitations, but we should not be focused on taking rights away from people. We should be focused on giving them more rights and more access to a regulated market.
Thank you. Dr. Otto?
I'm a strong believer in the right to privacy on private property. But I think also people need to be aware of how exercising that right can affect their neighbors, especially with a plant that can be quite stinky as it's getting goes to harvest. And neighbors can make formal complaints for this nuisance. So I think that needs to be factored into consideration of how actually people are engaging in this on their private property, and somehow encouraging people to police themselves so that they're not creating an illegal market, which just destroys it for everybody.
Thank you. Mary Jane?
Yeah, just real briefly, I think that is probably one of the other areas that we can also start to blend in the conversation of not another industry on the backs of Mother Earth. We do a lot of work, across the United States, and we hear the green rush quite a bit. How many of you have heard about the green rush, right? And I'm in many, many rooms with a bunch of old white men, and I'm having to tell them, we're still cleaning up after y'all's gold rush, so we don't need your green rush. And when we say this messaging, I think that one of the other things that, we're talking about in regards to sovereignty and personal sovereignty is this is like, you said, basic human right to do these things like feed ourselves, take care of our children. And when we come to the notion of home grow, I think that that's when people are like, okay, this is my baby, this is my plant, I'm growing it, I know what I'm putting into it because I know what I want to go into my body. It is when you have these massive indoor cultivation centers, highlight deprivation, who knows what, with pesticides, herbicides, and nutrients going on these plants, and then, the integrity of, their process is just always questionable. So I think that the more that you know your farmer, the closer you are to your food and medicine.
Thank you. And tied to the issue of legalization, should cannabis smoking be allowed in public parks and public beaches? Would anyone like to tackle that one?
This is a tough one because let's just relate it to cigarette smoking. Okay, cigarette smoke in general is offensive. Weed smoke smells a little more. It smells really good. But it's also offensive to a lot of people. So that's going to be one to work with. But I really think it should be treated similar to how people now that smoke cigarettes are. And here in Hawaii, we're talking about canna tourism and so forth. Well, that's a big problem. I have a lot of friends that come visit me in Maui and stay at the resorts and so forth, and almost all of them have been fined heavily for smoking weed. Outside in areas away from children and so forth, they're very respectful, but still, this security sees them and says no. So, that has to be dealt with, obviously, and it can be. I've been in other states and countries where cannabis tourism was starting to take off, and the hotels had learned how to deal with it, and it was done in a very elegant way, and with keeping children, in separate areas and so forth. So, but it is a tough navigation with smoking, obviously.
Okay, I'm just gonna put it out there that I am that tourist that just doesn't follow directions very well. I woke up this morning with a little nasty gram note and a text message on my phone saying that our little secret spy detectors were triggered, the Wi-Fi sensors and all of their analytics. So I got a $500 fine for smoking on the balcony of my hotel last night. On the balcony. At the Twin Fin. So on the balcony of the hotel. And so it's attached to the building, but I just heard this other conversation about, you smoke outside, you get in trouble, you smoke inside, you're in trouble, which goes back to this whole concept of being able to have consumption lounges, because I can tell you that when these adult use states are legalizing, people that live in Section 1 housing, where it is still federally illegal and there's zero tolerance in these federal laws, they're risking getting their homes taken away from them. College students across America getting kicked out of their dorms and getting their federal Pell still taken away. So there are still challenges, so we always have to look at the unintended consequences. If this, then that, with almost every mapping out. Like, what's gonna happen if we overturn this? Like, what else is gonna fall down? And I do see that it creates an opportunity in such a high tourism mecca that you can really lean into the consumption challenge opportunity here.
Yes. Very controversial, but at the end of the day, depending on whatever is introduced or passed, compromises sometimes have to be made.
Hey, Will, that was the most expensive joint opening that I've ever
I've had a few of those.
Well, let's move on. Okay.
Just to touch in on the hotel, the Twin Fin, so I'm staying there too. And I did not get caught on the balcony, thank goodness, and maybe or maybe not, I was on the balcony at one point. However, I do ask always, where is the smoking area? And they told me in front of the valet to just go out in the street corner. I did so. Families start walking by me. So, you know, it's herding us into an uncomfortable situation. Well, I didn't take my medicine that day or that time because, you know, I didn't want to disturb these families. I didn't want to be offensive. But where did I go? What did I do? Well, I ended up in a car smoking that day. Not with the driver, but all the same. You know, the police wouldn't like that, would they? So where do we go? You know, that's the question. Where do we go? Here, this year, we can't even smoke outside. So it's, you know, use the word discriminate, or we're just, you know, we're very, we're herded into situations that are uncomfortable. And like I just wanted to mention the Twin Fin, they told me where to smoke. I go and smoke there, and there's families everywhere. You can't do that.
So Mary Jane, what can Hawaii learn from mainland U.S. markets, and or what should we avoid?
Avoid the green rush. Think of public health and safety and how eventually when these imaginary state lines go down, how these systems will eventually integrate with each other, because everybody's building all of these laws like it is really, really frustrating that public health and safety is always taking the back burner of this conversation. And so what ends up happening, what I see in a lot of these states is children get increased access because, I mean, vape pens are just everywhere. They can just snag one and bring it to school, and the schools still have all of their rules in place. And so young people that have increased access, you know, even though our youth risk behavior surveys in those states like Colorado, Washington, Nevada show that the youth rates are not necessarily going up, they're not increasing, but they still have the access, which means, you know, sometimes our kids are gonna get, you know, suspensions and expulsions. So we need to be able to have investment into those programs on the front end. Again, for me, I see a lot of this, it's like once we get all of this cannabis money in our tax revenues in the coffers, and then we're gonna start to do these things. But a lot of those appropriations need to be thought of on the front end. How are we gonna have the youth education, you know, programs from day one, and running some of those infomercials. And I think that's the other thing. I'm telling you, keep it with the kids. Don't start these legalization efforts without talking with the young people, because our young people are so smart. They're just so smart. We saw a lot of states make it to where you couldn't even, you know, work in cannabis until you were 21 and over. Well, in Washington State, they changed that. Family farms. If you're 16 years old, you can work on the farm. We have tribal communities that are like, oh yeah, okay, we can change the law, or we can develop the laws how we want to, and now we have some of our tribal, and this is specifically on the industrial fiber side, we've got Head Start kids, you know, kids under the age of 5 working on farms. We've got youth programs bagging industrial hemp herd and bagging it up for commercial, you know, sales for their tribal industrial fiber projects. So I would really say that find ways that as we destigmatize this conversation, how we think of this as jobs, 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 careers and workforce development that have workforce and career ladders to them. Not just, I'm gonna be a bud tender for life. I'm gonna be a bud tender and I'm gonna own my own store someday.
Thank you. Now, there is a perception that cannabis can hurt Hawaii's image as a family-friendly destination. Do you think, Representative, that can happen, and how do we avoid that?
I think it's a concern, and I think it can happen if we're not doing some of the things that this panel is talking about, thinking about these things on the front end. And I love it that, you know, in our bill last year, we were talking about lounges and being able to create those spaces so that we could have a more friendly tourism experience. I'm so sorry you got fined $500. I didn't even know they could do that. Like, that's like incredible. They can do that. They can do a lot of things. So it's thinking about these things on the front end to make sure that we don't fall into this trap. What you said when you started.
Anyone like to add to that?
It's normalizing cannabis. Okay, parents smoke cigarettes in front of their kids, they drink in front of their kids, they do really awful things when they're drunk in front of their kids. Most cannabis scenarios do not involve that. So I think that, I mean, I've been in situations all around. I have a 30-year-old right now, and as he was growing up, I never hid cannabis from him. From the time he was 1 year old, it was part of his life. We go and visit friends, the first thing your friend asks, hey, you want to burn one? Sure, we burn one. It all happens in front of the children. But they are not there getting secondhand smoke and so forth, but it's also something that we normalize. So it wasn't a big deal to the kids. And when my kid was in high school, King K and so forth, yeah, he smoked a lot of weed and so forth, and now it's not something he's interested in. It's quite interesting, you know, I find it fascinating. And I see this with a lot of cannabis parents, whereas you normalize it along the way, it is not stigmatized, and therefore they'll go their separate ways. They aren't going to be potheads. They're, you know, they're their own person, the same way they would be around normal society, which smokes cigarettes, which drinks alcohol, and so forth. Cannabis has to be normalized, and it's a lot safer than those other two items that children are around all the time. So, you know, let's just get real, right?
Thank you. Dr. Otto?
Well, maybe one way to normalize, as you say, is to recognize that this is really a medicine. And if we're going to treat it as a medicine, then patients should have the right to be able to use their medicine. And, you know, I talk to my patients all the time about moving to other safer ways of inhaling, like dry herb vaporizers, which I think that patients should be allowed to use in their condominiums, that tourists should be able to use in their hotel rooms, because you're not generating a smoke that can be bothersome to other people. So I think that perspective maybe could help drive this conversation.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. If cannabis is legalized, should we have a horizontal system or a vertical system for our businesses and residents? Why don't we do Dr. Otto and Karlyn?
Well, you know, so that was a question that we wrestled with on the 2014 Dispensary Task Force. And I just want to briefly read you some of the recommendations in the task force's report. Recommendation 1, the Department of Health shall determine the number of dispensary licenses based on a guideline of 1 for every 500 patients, adjusted annually based on patient residency. That actually made it into the statute, and that's something that the Department of Health could exercise if they wanted to. Let's see, the Department of Health may begin offering licenses for dispensaries and producers. There was this distinction that we were making between producers and dispensaries, not necessarily something that would happen in a vertical model. The Department of Health shall determine the number of medical marijuana production centers. Licenses to issue based on a ratio of producers will have up to 1,000 plants at any one time. That was kind of the original vision. Now what we're doing is allowing vertically integrated, limited licensees to produce upwards of like 7,000 plants. So we're moving away from what was something that we discussed, which was more of a horizontal model. Beginning on January 1, 2017, the Department of Health may offer a minimum of 30 producer licenses. That's significantly different than what we have now. Medical marijuana production centers shall distribute only to dispensaries or other production centers licensed pursuant to this section. So that again emphasizes this vision of having producers and then dispensaries who would actually be doing the distributing. And I hope that that's something that we can move forward with or move towards, because there are, I guess what you'd call legacy growers who've been growing here for decades, outdoors, under what you might consider organic conditions, and have learned how to address all the pests and issues that we face in a climate where, you know, we're growing year round, and being able to produce material that can pass all of the current state safety and potency tests. So we can't say that just because it's being grown outdoors that it won't be safe. So, and I think it's a severe restriction on our dispensaries that they have to grow in indoor facilities. I know you can have transparent roofs, which might help, but still, that's, you know, building from the ground up, significant expense, and lots of moisture, which means lots of mold, and that's an issue we're dealing with constantly in Hawaii. So, if we're going to talk about vertical versus horizontal, I think there's, and I would hope this would be for medical use, being able to integrate our legacy growers into that, so that, and this also ties in with the branding, because Hawaii has, you know, some of the best sunlight in the world and best growing conditions, and, you know, the soil, which could all contribute to these high quality brands and medicine. So that's how I would answer that question.
I would say that running a vertical company, right? So, and just so everybody knows, a vertical company means you have to make it yourself, you have to sell it yourself, you can't buy anything from anybody else. And any business person would agree that most times that is a very difficult model, and it is not a profitable model. Now, what I do want to highlight, because as the CEO of NOAA Botanicals, and then as a Native Hawaiian born and raised here, also of a family that, you know, has legacy growers, I firmly have always been passionate about moving more people into the regulated market. But we have to address the root issue, right? As to why we haven't issued any more licenses, why there's no more participation than the original 8 that signed up 10 years ago. And that is because the Department of Health. We have to acknowledge these things because no one's holding them accountable, right? So I kind of complained earlier, but I'm gonna complain again. Like, the program has shrank and gotten smaller for 4 consecutive years. In 2024, the program lost 5% of patients. At the end of 2025, we lost another 3.85% of patients. Okay, so why is that happening? Because the restrictions to join the program are very burdensome, right? Cannabis today is the only medicine in the state that you cannot get it on the day your doctor prescribes it. So that's challenge number 1. Why would anybody want to use cannabis as a medicine if you can't get it on the day your doctor prescribes it, right? You have to first schedule an appointment, then you have to attend the appointment, then you have to pay $105 to get a card that is only gonna be good for 12 months. You have to take those 3 steps first. Now, you have to wait another 1 to 3 days for the Department of Health to issue you a card. Then when you get that card, you still have to pay the state fee, you have to pay for your medicine, right? So the state has taken this stance of let's over-regulate medical cannabis so that we erode participation and we don't have to expand. We all have to acknowledge that that is why the program is the way it is today. So, would we like to have more legacy growers join the regulated market? 1000%. If you are an expert in growing, we should share the premium products you produce with everyone, right? If you are an expert at making edibles, we should share what you do, what you're passionate about, and how well you do it with all of the customers. Those things to me are all no-brainers. Everyone wants those things. What no one wants to address is that we have a medical cannabis program that is near collapse and no one is fixing it. Okay, like every year we have advocates and people like Will and Della and other licensees, and we all show up to the Capitol and we say, hey, we gotta fix the medical program. How's about we try to get people their medicine on the day it gets prescribed? and the Department of Health says no. And then we say, okay, how's about we make it cheaper for people to join the program? And the Department of Health says, yes, no, right? So like, we can have all of these great ideas, and we do have these great ideas, but we need to figure out how to get the capital to support holding Department of Health accountable to improving the current program, because that is the holdup, right? That's also why nobody wants to embrace adult use, or a lot of people don't want to embrace adult use, because it's unknown. Why is it unknown? Because we have a 25-year-old medical program that they just buried in the ground and left there, and now they're like, oh look, nothing's growing. It's been 25 years, what happened? We shouldn't do this. Like, we have to make changes. It has to start with the medical program, and then we can all grow together, right? We have the framework, and just think about this, right? You hear all of these people, I'm sorry, I'm gonna rant a little bit. You hear all these people saying, oh, we're so afraid of adult use, oh, we don't know what to do. What are you talking about? We have had a regulated framework for the past 10 years. We have a framework. The licensee framework tracks from seed to sale. We get held accountable through the seed to sale tracking system down to 1 gram of flour. Wow. Everything is accounted for, everything is under camera, 24/7, 50-day storage. We know how to do it. We can share that knowledge with everybody else and teach everybody else how to do it, and we can start a regulated market. But what is the biggest barrier to that? To collaboration, to teamwork, to getting different stakeholder groups together. Also Department of Health, right? When I joined the cannabis industry 5 years ago, the first thing I wanted to do was start to do educational events with medical providers. And the rule was, no, you are not allowed to do that. That is very self-serving. Don't you dare educate the public about this medical program. And the Department of Health wouldn't do it either. And when I pointed out that in the 2000 legislation that came out, it mandated that they were responsible for public engagement and education, and had done zero learning events for the entire duration of the program, the answer was like, oh, well, too bad, so sad, keep moving on. So, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but everybody is so excited about adult use, and we have good information. We have good stakeholder groups, and we can figure things out, but we have to figure out how to get the Department of Health to embrace the program, enhance the program, and fix that as we continue to move forward.
I just wanted to give a quick follow-up on that. You know, regulators like to regulate, and now the new manager of the Office of Medical Cannabis Control and Regulation was the most recent Deputy Attorney General for the program. So we're moving in a law enforcement direction. We're not moving in a patient-centric direction. And I think the answer for that is showing up at the legislature and at the hearings and making your voices known, because otherwise what's going to happen is, and this has been my experience, if our state lawmakers, like during the hearings or a lot of times behind closed doors during conference, they have questions about what to do, they'll turn to the Department of Health because they're, I guess, they're best experts and they honor their opinion. And if there's not another majority opinion that's saying, no, that's not the direction we need to move in, then it's just not going to happen.
It is so important to engage in your state government. State government is very powerful here in Hawaii, and Governor Green and his Department of Health, they control the situation. Okay, Mary Jane?
I think another critical component of this vertical that y'all have like some foresight from the different states is around testing. So when we had Minnesota adult use laws passed, even a year prior to that, I was telling the tribes, if y'all would work together on this very important component called testing, you guys are gonna kind of like own the game, not just have a market monopoly for a couple of years, but really be able to do something that no other tribes, except for one in Washington State, was able to do. So we have a Puyallup tribe in Washington State, and they started out as medical. They opened up their own medicinal testing lab, and as a part of their testing lab, you know, it's just to kind of break even, creates great jobs. But that's their quality assurance, because there is a dirty little thing that's happening called pay for play for higher numbers in the cannabis industry. And the last thing that we want to see happen to Hawaii is all of those shops, the testing labs that are getting the license and then they're getting shut down from all of these other states, create a new DBA, fly out here and try to do the same thing out here. And then on the backside of that, so the tribes in Minnesota didn't open up any kind of testing labs. They're the only flower on the street right now, and they can't get it tested for 6 months because there's a huge backlog of testing. And so they can't even get their products to market. They can't get processed because they can't get it tested for over 6 months. So think of, that whole vertical. Who's going to be doing the testing? Who's going to be in charge of, and I think that goes back to the science component of things, the medicinal component, keeping it as medicine, the strains, the cultivars, the why people are even wanting to smoke, and for me, all recreational is medicinal still anyway.
Thank you. So at this time, what I like to do is offer an open mic to our panelists. If there's anything you'd like to say regarding cannabis that we didn't discuss, we'll give you 2 minutes to say your piece, and after that, if there's some time, I'd like to ask if there's a couple questions, and then we'll end our event. So again, thank you to Representative Della Belatti, Will Grinnell, Karlyn Laulusa, Mary Jane Oatman, and Dr. Clifton Otto. So who'd like to be first on an open mic? Karlyn. 2 minutes, please.
Great. I would just like to highlight, right, this is a very rare, once in a lifetime opportunity for us to stand up a new industry. That is a serious opportunity that we probably won't see another one in the next lifetime. And I think for Hawaii specifically, when I think about that and I think about how do we set ourselves up for success, I really cannot stress enough that there are 2 things I'm very passionate that I think we should do, right? The first is to set up a distinct heritage certification for Hawaii cannabis. That is something that we see in certain places and on certain foods or beverages, right? Like wine. They come with all these different labels. It does quality assurance. It makes sure that you're protecting local specialties from imitations, right? Or other people saying that that's Hawaii genetics when it's not Hawaii genetics. And I feel very passionately about this. I mean, if we can do that, then it'll ensure that all the consumers, whether local or tourists, are getting products and cannabis or pakalolo that's grown here. And like I said earlier, we have all kinds of different climates and terrain here, or they call it, the fancy word is terroir, right? That's the fancy word they use to describe an origin of a specialty product. And that is what we are, and that is what we have to offer. So I do think, as we fight the good fight, we need to make sure we figure out how to secure the future of Hawaii cannabis by just having some sort of certification program that certifies the origin. That in it of itself sets the state up to be very exclusive and premium when it comes to a cannabis experience. Not on every single corner, not only at the clubs. I mean, that really sets us apart from what other places are doing. And then I think the second most meaningful thing we could do would be to expand the regulatory framework, like I had mentioned earlier. And I think we miss, the debates, the discussions about cannabis are so contentious and there's so much baggage that sometimes we all get caught up trying to defend our points and we forget about the future state. And what if we could agree on anything, let's just focus on what we can agree on. Cannabis should be legal, people shouldn't be in jail for a plant. Oh, and we want a really profitable, sustainable, thriving industry for our people. And so I think including all kinds of different licenses, right? If you look at current legislation, Representative Tarnas has done a great job with supporters like Della, making sure they are expanding and trying to introduce new license types, but there are a lot of different new license types, and we have to be forward-thinking enough to identify that we should try to work those in as legislation moves. But yeah, at the highest level, those 2 things combined make Hawaii Pakalolo special and make sure it's certified here in state, and then create an expansive industry that allows everybody to participate.
Thank you. Representative Belatti, Congressional
to the public
Right,
to ask
okay.
their questions, but I do want to just thank you all, because this has actually inspired me. I've been a little bit put aside sometimes from cannabis, and this experience has really made me inspired to do more.
Mary Jane?
Just really briefly, I see Hawaii cannabis very similar to what we've already witnessed with Cali Humboldt cannabis. The world wants it. The world's waiting for it, and they're just trying to figure out how to get it. So when we're setting up the system here, think like, what is the highest bar? What is the country that wants it the most, and what is it going to take to get there, and then work backwards from there. So EU, GMP processing facilities, high transparency, because you guys are going to be on the front lines of all U.S. states to be able to ship globally if things are set up properly.
Thank you. Will Grinnell?
Yeah, so the panel obviously is about branding, and you just touched on that. We are the brand, I mentioned that before. It's sort of a no-brainer once we have the legislative process to allow it. We are pretty much 20 years behind legislatively here in Hawaii, as Karlyn has mentioned a few times. And it's sad, and it's a story I have to relay as I travel around with other cannabis communities, and they don't understand it. They're like, oh wait, you're from Hawaii. A quick success story, and this is how cannabis should work. In Washington State, as you know, might know, they do tier 1, 2, and 3 grows. Tier 1 being smaller, 3 being very large. A good friend of mine about 8-10 years ago got one of the tier 2 licenses, and it only cost them $1,500. Him and his sister pitched together. They got the rental space to have a dispensary. They put it together. They put the very only $50,000 that they had in between the two of them up. They could barely keep the lights on for the first 3 months, and now 8 years later, they've got 4 or 5 dispensaries in central Washington in the Wenatchee area, and are very successful, very, very successful. Like millions and millions. They came out and bought a place in Maui, and that's how we became friends. So that success should be available to everyone in the community that wants to work hard. Believe me, growing cannabis is one of the hardest jobs in the world. Growing tomatoes, growing anything. Farmers, let's have a big up the farmers. We suffer with regulation, and all farmers do. Corn farmers, everybody. And they suffer with pathogens and all the other things too, the natural disasters that can happen to us. So just with that success story in mind, let's try to make that available to the whole Hawaiian community.
Dr. Otto, any closing comments?
I've seen from my patients that this is a very powerful medicine, something that can benefit from supervision from medical providers who have knowledge on this subject. And I'm with MJ. I don't think there is such a thing as recreational use. I think people who think they're using it recreationally are really treating anxiety, insomnia, depression. I mean, I would even argue that there's medicinal benefit from euphoria. And I would not really draw a distinction between medical use and spiritual use. So I'm concerned that if we move to a recreational program, that once there's national legalization, that the dormant commerce clause is going to kick in, and we're going to have mainland big cannabis come in and take over our industry. That's one of the reasons why I'm focusing on medical use, because that is a sovereign constitutional authority that the state can control. The intrastate medical use of cannabis we can control, and there are ways that we can reharmonize the state and federal regulation of cannabis in Hawaii along the lines that are very similar to the peyote exemption, which has been around since the 1960s, and ways that distributors like the Peyoteros in Texas can distribute Schedule I controlled substance to members of the Native American Church. So I think there's an opportunity to take advantage of medical use at this time and focus on that first. That would be my suggestion.
At this time, I'm going to take a couple questions. We don't have much time, but if the question can be specific, concise, and not long drawn. This gentleman had his hand up. Yes, sir.
I am so sorry, but I am not from here. I freely admit that.
You don't have to be sorry for that.
It's beautiful over here. I love it. I'm really sorry. I'm not.
There's aloha for everyone.
But I I've seen a lot going in this space, and my question is, if we're talking from a medical perspective, we're talking cannabinoids more than THC. We're talking CBGA, CBG, CBD, CBDA, CBN, all these others. Why is there not more focus on producing things that have those cannabinoids that are THC-free concentrations until people get more comfortable with the evidence and the research that's being put out? Instead of putting so much emphasis on including the THC up front at a time when THC is a problem legislation, why not focus more on the other cannabinoids?
Okay, does anyone want to take that, try to answer that? I
That's
don't
always
know.
just false against. I feel like
I'll let Dr. Otto go first.
If you're, I'm sorry.
No, go please.
If you're asking why here in Hawaii in
Yes,
particular, because we're
that's-
20 years behind. It's quite
Because we're
simple.
trying to help patients, we're trying to help people.
It's
Help
quite
them
simple. I
benefit.
think I mentioned before, my wife doesn't smoke or take part in cannabis. However, she has Crohn's disease, and CBD and a ratio of CBD and THC is very helpful to her. We can't access that here in Hawaii in a
CBGA?
delivered form, right? Everything's sort of like street. I think maybe the dispensaries now are getting into entourage, right? Which is good. So now it is accessible, but really only until a year or two ago, those entourages of cannabinoids were not available. So my answer to you is that we're just too far behind. We don't have those facilities. We don't have that thinking. We have so many other battles that we brought up that we have to get through. So
Patients
that's,
are suffering, and people can get help before the DHS and everybody gets their stuff together.
Point made, sir, definitely. Did you want to answer, or should we ask another question?
Sure, no, yeah, I would echo that. We have a lot of limitations on us as an island state. We're nothing like any other state in the Union because of our geography and our culture and our politics. We've only got one testing lab in the entire state. And that lab is on Oahu, and we've got dispensaries on other islands. So that can raise some obvious issues. But, so we need a backup lab. We need a gold standard lab that's running reference methods, analytical methods, so that we have some way of verifying what's being tested. But I don't think there's the market that can sustain several different labs. We used to have 4, and it dropped down to 1. So we need maybe some subsidies or some type of support from the state to make sure that testing is happening appropriately. But also there is an emphasis on THC, and products are being priced based on their THC content. And I don't know exactly. It's maybe some plants produce more THC than others, and it costs the same to grow them. So I think part of that is because we're always reaching towards recreation and producing products like, oh yeah, I need my blood pressure medicine in a soda. Yeah, that's how I want to take my medicine. There's always this reach, and I think that's putting the dispensaries at a disadvantage. Why can't a patient go in and say, okay, I want a 2-to-1 CBD to THC, 20 milligrams per milliliter of CBD, 10 milligrams per milliliter of THC in an infused oil, MCT oil. Can I have that? Oh, okay, well, give me a second. I'm going to go in the back room because I've got my standard 1-to-1, and I'm going to cut it with a little bit of a CBD to make it stronger and give you what you need. Or using the terpene profiles and working with that rather than saying, okay, well, this works good for pain, this works good for sleep, and the patient takes that and they go home and they overdose and they're having these bad reactions. So I think it all comes back to medical use for me. If we focus on the patient and what the patient needs, we would be making those right choices.
Thank you.
And clear the healing job.
Thank you. Marcus, our hempan, yes.
I have a quick question. There's so many success stories across the mainland already. I feel like there's a lot of wheels spinning right now trying to figure out what will work here in Hawaii. Has there ever been a time when we take some of the lessons learned from the states that are implemented already and make something here to present to the Board of Health?
Quick
can
answer
answer
is
that.
yes. Quick answer is yes.
The wheel has been invented in many states, and there's some good
Who wanted
models.
to answer that? Karlyn? Yeah.
So, good question, and the answer is yes. I personally have, along with my team, for the past 5 years, consistently communicated the need for education in the cannabinoid space, the need for education. We were the first dispensary to open a terpene bar because we wanted to go down the education route to try and educate everyone. But I will highlight, right, the reason we have only one lab is because the program is near collapse. Okay, you can't have more than one lab when you don't have any patients. And it is so hard to join the program. People don't want to join the program, so that's all we got is one lab. That's what we're working with. There's also no motivation on the Department of Health side to embrace any of the rules or regulations or suggested amendments that licensees or other stakeholders like them put together. Right? Everyone puts together their recommendations on how to update the rules, and we send it to the Department of Health, and then they ignore it. Because there's absolutely no reason that they need to take our recommended amendments and implement them. It is completely up to that department. And so I will highlight, we touched on this a little bit earlier, we opened this way, right? When the question was asked about, how everyone was feeling about ballot initiatives, right? So I'll highlight something. This state is the only Western state that does not have ballot initiatives and referendums, because when we were originally colonized and became a state, they did not want Native Hawaiians to be able to vote on what they wanted to see happen in state government. So you fast forward all the way to now, that is still happening. I feel firmly that we need to educate our kids on the Hawaii administrative rules and the Hawaii revised statutes, because those are the two guardrails that set the pathways for how to work with your government. And there are ways to implement change, but not everybody understands those ways, and it's very difficult.
Can I add one thing? And this is going to go to a constitutional convention. Opening up our constitution is a scary thing. We're going to try to do it potentially with a con ad that's tailored and marketed for this question of cannabis. But every 10 years, and we're going to be coming up, I think, on 2028, the question is going to be before the population again, should we have a constitutional convention? I have gone yes, no, yes on it. And I will say that one of my frustrations is if we again see cannabis derailed for another 2 years, there is something that's broken in our government right now. And power to the people. Like, the Constitutional Convention in 1978 was powerful because of a whole series of things. People were pissed off because the environment was burning. People were frustrated at corporations. People were, think about the 1970s. They were coming out of the Vietnam War and that experience. What are we in now? We are seeing some of those same things. My daughter is frustrated with climate change. That's why I want to go to Congress. We keep not doing things. So something I would urge, and there's actually a conversation going on outside of just this industry. There's a lot of people in the Native Hawaiian community talking about, do we need another constitutional convention? There are a lot of people on Bishop Street that are starting to fund people to think about a constitutional convention. So I would put this to you folks. If we fail again at getting something rational out of the legislature, people are talking about constitutional convention, and that is the opportunity for all of you to become delegates to a con-con and make your voice heard. So just think about it. It is a scary prospect. Again, when I first came into politics, I was one of the few who was saying we need a con-con, because guess what? We weren't moving on marriage equality. And that was something that I wanted to do. We got marriage equality, and I was like, okay, we're good. We've got medical dispensaries. I thought we had a framework and a way to go forward. But 10 years later, and we're still talking about the same things, think about it in 2028 for a constitutional convention.
Okay.
How much does
Quick question, please.
How much does it cost to establish a testing laboratory?
How much does it cost to establish a testing lab? A lot of money. Does anyone have an exact figure?
How much?
Millions?
So if you're talking about starting a full count, there's a lab where you can do just cannabinoids. You can get away with something like that between $50,000 to $75,000.
Triple that for Hawaii.
But if you're talking full panels, cannabinoids, heavy metals, pesticides, residual solvents, all of that, the equipment for that alone is about $750,000 to $800,000 for the piece of equipment itself. I do, yes.
Okay, thank you. And one more, yes.
So can I comment on that?
Quickly, on the cost of the
Yes.
lab? Yes.
So, right now, the part of these costs are being created by the type of testing that the labs are required to do. And the dispensaries, and I know this, talking from a dispensary representative, I mean, you've got to have every single product tested. So like your 1.5 gram pre-roll and your 3 gram pre-roll, they both have to undergo all the same testings, which is completely unnecessary. Before we even had a dispensary licensing process, I went to the Department of Health State Lab and proposed to them a bunch of what you call surrogate tests, meaning tests that you can perform to pick up about maybe 90% of all the important contaminants that you want to pick up. And then if you detect those, then you do, step 2, which would be more in-depth testing. We could do testing much more cheaply in Hawaii if we took a more reasonable approach. Instead of adopting, I think we adopted Maryland's testing program, which was one of the most stringent testing programs in the country. And that is creating a lot of problems for people who want to open labs and for dispensaries that are trying to keep up with these costs.
Thank you, Dr. Otto. And one more question, and we'll be finishing. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. Yes, sir.
I'm curious who the major opposition is and what their reasoning is.
Can we talk offline?
At the end of the day, your state government, I'll say it again, is the most important entity to help you, and it could be those who oppose as well. The governor has a lot of power, the Department of Health has a lot of power. So this year, you must engage in those who are running for the state legislature and engage with the governor. I'm serious. If you had a governor who was pro-cannabis, a lot could have been done. And we don't have one because he's a medical doctor. And so you can see some of the contradictions that may or may not be there. But, he was involved in the medical cannabis bill. And a little footnote in history, if I may. Senator Green was the lead senator on the medical cannabis bill. And on the last day of session, because he was not able to create a bill with Representative Belatti, the bill died. The medical cannabis bill was dead for 2015. Okay. I was the second chair in the Senate, and I was also vice president of the Senate at that time. I went to our president, Senator Kim, and we went to the Speaker of the House, Joe Suki, and we said, we want to bring this bill back from the dead. We want to bring it back, although session had ended and the hearing had been done. So, because the legislature can make its own rules, we brought back the bill. I took over the Senate as the lead, and we were able to pass a bill. It wasn't a perfect bill, but we passed the bill. But again, in Hawaii, your state government controls the medical cannabis and the cannabis industry. And they will determine what happens and what does not happen. Unless the federal government steps in, and I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. So with that, did you have a closing comment? Because I think we do have to go.
Just the follow the money. It's the AFT, the alcohol, the firearm, and the tobacco. And when I say firearm, people are like, what? And I'm like, the NRA. There's a lot of financial backing, lobbying against cannabis rescheduling as well as adult use programs. And those monies are so big, they'll go in any state. They're definitely deep in Idaho. They're here in Hawaii. Definitely alcohol and tobacco corporations are lobbying against this big time. They juice big time, and they can spend the $5 to $10 million for the lobbying firms, and that's money that could go toward the testing lab.
And I do believe our time is up at this
So
stage.
just one more.
Okay, 30 seconds, please.
So since we're talking about Hawaii's original medical cannabis bill, I just want to recognize that one change that occurred during that weekend where it was being sorted out was the insertion of PTSD as a qualifying condition. That's when it happened, and PTSD is the #2 qualifying condition in Hawaii, and because of that, you've helped thousands of